Hello, everyone. Welcome to Avaya's Overcoming Narcissistic Abuse curriculum. I'm Andy Anderson. My partner, Ike Allen, and I are teachers, mentors, and the co-owners of Avaya University. Avaya is the creator of over 1,000 books, films, courses, teachings, and other supportive resources. Thank you so much for joining us. Our fellow teachers, Sue Marriot and Dr. Ann Kelley, are here to talk with us today about how early attachment and trauma impact narcissistic relationship dynamics. Sue and Ann are both psychotherapists in Austin, Texas, and together they co-host the top-rated podcast and online community called Therapist Uncensored. They bring decades of training and experience as well as cutting-edge research about modern attachment and neuroscience to their clients and listeners. Together they share a mission for building security around the world, one episode at a time. Therapist Uncensored now has almost 1 million downloads, and they are heard in 172 countries. And we have been honored to have Sue and Ann as featured teachers on several other Avaya events now, like healing from childhood trauma, breaking free from abandonment and betrayal, overcoming anxiety and depression. So welcome back.
We are pleased to be here. Thank you for having us back.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. It's always my pleasure. So let's dive into this really important topic. I'm so glad you guys wanted to do this, because I always think of you with, virtually every topic we cover here at Avaya. So, anyone can get caught in a relationship with a narcissist. It seems like a pretty common thing that we hear about in our society. So why do you think it is so appealing?
Well, it's appealing. A narcissist is developed out of a sense of insecurity. We forget that because they seem so confident. But it comes from a sense of insecurity where they've developed the ability to keep attention to them through these really dynamic ways, being charismatic, garnering a lot of attention, being humorous, funny, they need to live in their own ideal self, and they project that. So when they do that, it makes us believe in their ideal self. So what's so tempting about getting involved with somebody like that is if they're bigger than life and they see you and they see your ideal self, it's very compelling. And that attention is very compelling.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the way that I think of it too is that it's not just one of the ways we like to talk about it, and we actually linked the episode, is the injury of narcissism. Mm-hmm. That it's easy to kind of beat up on this idea of that it's other people and it's bad, those bad narcissists. Yeah. And certainly probably later we'll talk about the spectrum and the different layers and stuff like that. But we want to come at it because the opposite of narcissism, in a way, they kind of go together. So one of the vulnerabilities and why it's so attractive is if we don't have a really strong, if we have a history of injury, then when somebody is telling you how it is and you feel loved and adored, then and they're the life of the party, then by extension, you feel better, which is part of why then it's really, really hard to get out of a relationship like that, even when you know it's not good for you.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yes, absolutely. So you basically just touched on this, but are there particular people that are more vulnerable to that and have a more difficult time getting out of that environment, even though they know this is just not a good relationship for me, types of character traits or something?
Yes. As Sue was saying, when we have grown in this world in a way that was not as stable as our own childhood, and we have a base of insecurity, and for some of us, we've developed more of a preoccupied way of feeling our security by looking to others. And we look to others for our sense of safety, for identity, for feeling important. And it can lead to this kind of constant state of feeling insecure and dependent. So when you meet somebody who's bigger than life and so confident, I think the thing about narcissism is they typically come across not only charismatic and humorous, but super confident in who they are. And when you don't feel that, it's very compelling to want to attach to somebody like that. So often people who have more preoccupied or more hyper vigilant styles are very attracted to that sense of confidence.
Right. And on the podcast, we talk about it in colors. So the side that is preoccupied, we call red, being very externally oriented and trying to, that's kind of the clingy, needy, dependent, hanging on side. And again, we all have all of these things inside of us, including we all have narcissism, hopefully some. And then, generally, again, narcissism and attachment are two different things. But as we're beginning to move into that a little bit, narcissism has been historically linked some to the blue side, which is more of the dismissive avoidant side. It's not always, again, those are independent things, but it's a way to think about it, that it's somebody who has been raised with a lot of shame, and they don't come across that way. You wouldn't know it. As a matter of fact, you feel shame being in relationship with them because they're projecting their neediness out. And so that's part of the draw. And so anybody, the question is, who might be vulnerable? So it's anybody that would be vulnerable, that has, an early experience of having to mirror someone else, of having to not notice themselves and attend outward in order to be okay. There's just, that's a key and a lock. You know what I mean? Those two things just really go together.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you mentioned, right, too, that first of all, like a while back, you said something about like, right, we have some kind of narcissism within us. So it's not just like pointing the fingers outside saying these, right, horrible narcissistic people, and we don't have any of those qualities. And that's one thing I totally see in myself, because as we do all these different events at Avaya, it's like, oh yeah, okay, got those codependent tendencies, the abandonment issues, okay, the narcissistic, like all that stuff. It's like I think we all have some level of all of those things, and just, express them in maybe more stronger ways in different scenarios. But I love that. I think we all need to be reminded of that.
Well, and it brings up the whole notion of the different kinds of narcissism. Was that something you would want to hear about?
Yeah, please.
Did you want to?
Yeah, because when we talk about it being more on the blue or dismissive side, that often kind of lands in the more grandiose narcissism, those that have learned to protect themselves by kind of having to hold on to their ideal. And so when you have to hold on to your ideal, it's very hard to accept criticism and very hard to find the relationship in a connecting way. It's a lot more self-preserving. And though there's also more of a vulnerable narcissism, we can be prone to feeling ourselves as the most special in a negative way. We're like the worst ones. We're like
which still is pretty special.
Yes. I mean, it's hard to think of that, isn't it? It's hard to think of that when you're feeling really like especially bad, or especially, that actually is a form of narcissism, because you see yourself as sort of the worst instead of the best, like you kind of really suck. And that is a special form of vulnerable narcissism.
Interesting.
And yeah,
I've never really thought of it like that. But right, like the effect is still the same, because we're just focused on, right, something's wrong with us, or like in that sense, right? I guess it's like, oh, I'm the worst, or like we're the center of our own attention. Right?
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. It's the center of attention. Is what we need to draw attention. And when we're there, we often turn to others. You're preoccupied with others filling that up. Am I okay? Are you okay? And when we fall more on that spectrum, we're really looking for other people to sort of tell us that we're okay, rather than affirming. Is like we need that to fill up us because we don't feel okay.
Right. And one of the ways that those are connected, it's actually really important. So there's the grandiose narcissism, and then there's, people call different things, depressive narcissism or negative narcissism.
Vulnerable narcissism.
Right.
Yeah.
But the injury is very similar. And again, these often go together. And within each of these kinds of narcissism is think of it like there's, like with the grandiose, there's a really scared, shame-filled child. And then with the negative narcissism, there is somebody who wants to be seen and you know what I mean, that doesn't feel bad, actually, that wants to be like, see me, but has a lot of shame about that. So from that perspective, it's nice to just kind of put it on the continuum. And, and there's such a thing as not enough narcissism, right? Healthy narcissism, right. Like us to even do this, we have to have a little bit of healthy narcissism. We have to kind of believe in ourselves and think that we have something to say. And some people don't have enough. And so there's this selflessness that happens. They're also going to be really vulnerable to connect with somebody who has it all together, apparently.
Actually, they're particularly vulnerable when you don't have the sense of self, because as we talked about, what makes it so appealing? One of the things that makes it appealing is that when somebody mentioned it earlier, have such a big sense of self and you've been struggling with it, you can't find a sense of self, and your identity is what other people feed you. Those fit really well to begin with.
Mhm.
And as long as it stays in that dynamic, but as the individual becomes more healthy and says, hey, what about me? That can create a lot of conflict in the relationship. But that's particularly difficult about that is if somebody grows and kind of feels more a sense of wanting more room in a relationship with a narcissist and starts to act for that, it can create a lot of conflict. And unfortunately, a narcissist often struggles with that and can threaten to pull away. It's what makes a relationship so hard to leave, because that threat of withdrawal.
Right. If I have myself, I'm going to lose this other person.
Right.
I really think, and I, can mistake love. Sometimes it feels like love, but sometimes it isn't, as far as, or like we project love into them because we're feeling loving and we're more relational. But really, and again, so degrees, there's not enough narcissism. There's kind of this healthy amount. There's being a little self-centered and a little, whatever, easy to injure or grandiose. And then separately, kind of further down, is the malignant narcissist. And I'm sure you all have talked about that on the show. Alice Miller is my go-to. I just think that she nailed that.
A malignant narcissist, just for those that might be tuning into this one first, has a lot to do with individuals that will do some gaslighting or very abusive kind of criticism. What else would you describe? Like in the malignant, and that it's very toxic for individuals.
Right.
Mm-hmm. It can be very crazy making, because if in a gaslighting situation you have a struggle with your identity, you're more likely to give it up and go, oh my gosh, that was me, you're right. That was me, that you're right. So there can be a really powerful dynamic and very difficult to get out of that situation.
So like from what you're saying, it sounds like there's, yes, we have different labels that we can put on people that have different qualities of narcissism or lack thereof, but it seems like it's like a spectrum. Is that how you guys see it?
Absolutely. Just kind of like anything, again, like, borderline personality disorder, or like narcissism, that's considered a personality disorder. The diagnosis is considered a personality disorder. So it's not just you are or you aren't. It's a more helpful paradigm to think in terms of what level and what level of narcissism somebody has, and how functional or not functional it is. Because the truth is, in certain circumstances, we need to gather our narcissism and do well, like graduate school or something like that. And even in graduate, this is a good example, because we also have to learn, the teacher is the one who we have to mirror and figure out and feed back to them what they need, right? So that's a healthy version of it, where it doesn't matter if I think that's wrong or that I don't like the way that teacher's doing it. I need to mirror back.
It's a healthy version of mirroring.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Versus we fast forward that and you're in a relationship, and like Anne's saying, that you don't like have your own grounding. Then another term that's actually really important here is this concept of fawning. Is that something that y'all have talked about much?
No.
Do you want me to?
What is that?
So fawning is really actually important. You've heard about fight, flight, freeze.
Yeah.
Right. Most people have heard about that. Well, part of what freeze is about, that kind of lower nervous system threat response, another one that you can do is appease. And so if you learn in your early life that you just have to, yes sir, no ma'am, okay, I'm gonna, that you must appease to the other person in order to maintain a relationship. Mm-hmm. Again, that might just be relationship dependent, or the more you internalize that, and it's actually a form of trauma, which is where that you're not able to, so it's fawning, like I'm going to fawn over you. Mm-hmm. And I don't have the option, like I'm not just wooing you because I want to date you. That's one kind of fawning. This is where I can't even locate what I want inside myself if your need is around. Mm-hmm. And it is a response to early trauma.
So, and it can come from not just, you can think of maybe a child involved with abusive parents. So if I don't mirror you, there is a direct threat of being abused or rejected. But it's also, we often don't think about having a narcissistic parent who needs, as a child, we need to mirror them or they will feel deflated. And that's when we often can miss when we're thinking about our parents or situations that we've been in as a child, is that when you have a parent who will deflate if you stand in yourself.
Like the negative narcissism.
If you disagree, or you say, like, going through adolescence and go, you really need to reject your parent, and yet you can't, because if you do, they will collapse. A parent,
or you even think they'll collapse.
You'll think they'll collapse.
Yeah.
A parent collapsing is threatening. And it's threatening to your sense of safety and security. So if you can't live to your full self and stand separate from somebody for fear of abandonment or rejection, that's going to be very powerful. And it makes being in a relationship with a narcissist initially very powerful, but leaving it very difficult. Because if you leave a relationship, not only do you lose that attention and affection, but there can be a feeling of loss of sense of self. Because as Sue's saying, when you've learned to fawn, that's how you find your energy and attention and your sense of self. So to lose that can be very, very scary, to separate, to differentiate from somebody when you're used to sort of mirroring them.
Well, the thing that you said about, right, how like when you're a kid, you need, like, something I learned, and I think you guys may have said this when we did the abandonment event, is like something around like maintaining the integrity of your parents, right? And if your parent isn't okay with you standing in your power because that deflates their self-esteem, like, yeah, that's a big effect that it can have on someone later in life. And I just remember that. And I'm not sure if you said that or not, but I'm remembering this, something about like that integrity piece.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. It's the whole idea of narcissistic extension. So if you've been a narcissistic extension, meaning here's the person that you're wanting to connect to, and the way that they connect, the way that they can connect. And again, this isn't trying to beat up on this person, because they're injured too. But the way that they've learned to connect is that you have to be filling them, right? You please them, whether it be you do the tap dance, or that you're very happy, or whatever, or that you're performing, whatever it is, that you find that. And so then by extent, you're an extension of them. And then what that means is if you do something different, if you're sour instead of happy, or whatever it is, right? This can be very subtle. And you lose the contact with the person, and part of why you lose it is because this person feels like can't see you as a separate person. And so if you're doing something that makes them feel bad, then you're bad.
It really is threatening. And one of the things that really, from a neurological perspective, can activate this person, we're putting this person over here, somebody with some narcissistic vulnerability and injury, to feel a sense of separateness really activates a threat center and can create rage or overreaction or depression. And so someone in a relationship with that's really scary. And so, like Sue's saying, the need to be the extension is really, really important. And then it can fulfill your identity. And I think it would also be helpful to know that our culture, especially with women, we have been raised in quite a bit of ways to say to be selfless is to be idealized, right? To not think of yourself and to only be the giver. There's a lot of idealization in our culture of that. And so that can promote that sense that if I stand separate, wait, I have a need and it's different from yours, and it can feel wrong.
Yeah.
Especially for those of us that have been raised where it also can be a threat. So it also can feel wrong culturally and then dynamically. So it can be really powerful. And we want to say that because so often when we're caught in a relationship with somebody like this and you start to understand that, you can go, like, why can't I leave? And it can be very shaming. Like, why don't I know this isn't good for me. Why don't I just turn around and walk away? And we want people to understand this from a deeply compassionate place, how hard it is.
Right. And that it actually might be more helpful, instead of looking at the other person, to look at oneself. It's like, what is it about me that is having difficulty bearing what I would feel if I get in 3 dimensions and I exist? Right. And that actually is a step towards healing, because otherwise, if we're like, but you're doing this thing and you're doing that, we're still doing this where we're relating externally. So part of the, how do we break free, right? Is there, in some ways it's, again, I like to think of it systematically, like somebody who might appear more narcissistic in one relationship gets in a different relationship and maybe they're the extension, right? This isn't necessarily a fixed thing. So when we think of it more systematic like that, then there's hope. If, like, so a lot of people will ask us, like, should I leave? I've identified he's a narcissist, she's a narcissist, whoever, should I leave? Which is obviously we can't say yes or no, because who knows, right? But the more that we can get the focus off of what that person's doing and not doing and how you feel, like, is this, like, just because what that's doing is it's now I'm I'm attending to myself, and I'm forming an identity, and then it's going to be up to the other person if they're going to let that happen, if they're going to be able to grow in the relationship with them and be able to differentiate, be able to have separateness, be able to see the other person as a whole person. And when you start the relationship in this particular way, it's difficult to
shift it.
It's difficult to shift it. It's a lot easier to do that right on the get-go. But what I would say about this, should you leave or should you stay, is will the person, is a person aware, even a little bit, that they might have this effect? It might not be them, but something in the relationship causes this power dynamic. And will they work with you on and help you hold your voice and help you come to know what you're thinking? And because we need that. And because that's part of what the injury is. So if your partner or whoever, your boss or whoever it is, will work with you in it and own things and be interested in what if you're saying that you're having an experience, and if they are denying it, there's not a lot. What do you do with that? But if you can, sometimes we say something a little bit and then we back off, and then we're like, see, they don't listen. So I guess what I would say to any listener there is, would love to empower you to stay in. And so if they don't listen, then it means that you just need to elevate a little bit, say more, say it again, ask them when a good time is to talk. Don't let yourself be dismissed. Don't dismiss yourself.
I think when you're saying stay in, it's really important to hear that it's not necessarily stay in the relationship.
Definitely not stay in an abusive relationship. That's
right.
not what we're talking about. We're talking about a little bit more of the subtleties.
Yeah, stay in yourself and stay with the person. And I think especially if somebody's in a relationship or has been with somebody in a more malignant end, that can be really, really difficult. But I love what you're saying is that staying in yourself too.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to be able to hold a question of your own reality and to hold what is real for you. And when you live a little bit more preoccupied or insecure, it's hard to do that because you sort of doubt what your own experience is, and you turn to the outside world for
you self-reference how you're doing with someone else, like falling down and then looking at the other person to see if you're hurt. Right. So we don't want to self-reference to somebody who's not really seeing us as a separate person.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Stay in yourself. And absolutely, it occurs to be so much easier to just get out and not be paying attention to what's going on in us or how we react to certain scenarios or who we're being in a scenario and all of that. So absolutely. And I'm glad you clarified that it's not that stay in the relationship, and everybody is going to make that choice, for themselves, and everybody has a different truth there. So just wanted to reiterate that.
And also when we say stay in is to
really stay in yourself.
Yeah. And to think about, we often talk about on the podcast needing to pause. And so often, especially if one lives their body hyperactivated with the idea of separation or space, we tend to chase and then try to please. So that can be really easy to replicate in a relationship with a narcissist. If they threaten to pull, we chase, we try to please. And the staying in self is just pausing. Wait a minute, what am I actually fighting for? So taking your identity and kind of going, wait, what is actually my reality? And as Sue said, in terms of trying to communicate, one of the recommendations also is to start with the term for me, because often we are trying to convince somebody else about what is really happening. And when you start with the concept, for me, this isn't working. For me, this is what I need. It kind of breaks the tendency to accept somebody else's reality as fact or trying to convince them of their perspective.
It's hard to argue with. When you're standing on your own postage stamp and you're just claiming something for yourself, that's harder to get confused. If somebody treats you badly when you're just doing that, that's a real flag.
Because sometimes you can say, but you're being critical. Like, no, I'm not. You're being insecure. You're being ridiculous. You're being, so often through insecurity on a narcissist part, they can be at times belittling. You're being ridiculous, especially if you feel insecure. My gosh, is it easy to believe that? So being able to come back and wait, for me, this is really important. This may be different for me. This is not ridiculous. There's a freedom in that is not trying to convince them of anything. Actually, you're talking to yourself.
Right. And the thing is, if you really get there, that relationship will clarify very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because now you're challenging, you're not being an extension, you're insisting that you exist separate from that person.
Mm-hmm.
And that will, again, that'll either bring the person along of like, oh my gosh, right? Like we both need help here, not just you.
Mm-hmm.
Or it'll blow it up. Like it's not going to work.
Right,
And then the person will really behave bad. It'll get much more clear quickly as you're able to embody yourself.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I can see that absolutely. Once you start speaking up for yourself, right? Like then things change in your outer world because of, right, who you're being and what you're willing to say or the boundaries you're creating. So one thing, like, here's something I'm curious about, because I really speak from personal experience and just in life in general, and times where I've maybe felt insecure and, right, lonely in getting what's there for me might not be what's there for somebody else. Like to me, it's sometimes kind of a lonely thing, which I think is why so many times I stray away from it. Cause I'm like, God, it's just me in this, right? I don't know if you can relate to that or any suggestions around like if people are experiencing that.
Well, I would say that is like brilliant. It's really brilliant because even like that's a way of, I think of it as like putting a staff in the ground. It's like, okay, this is something that I can feel to be true, that I know that I'm lonely. And it is lonely because if you're not merging, you really can feel yourself as separate. And especially it's lonely if you can begin to see that person's not going to be able to see you, you know, and that's terrifying. These are all some of the reasons why it's really hard to get out. And so one of the things we like to talk about is like, you know, there's this guardrail to guardrail, you know what I mean? I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out. You know, I hate that person. And then all of a sudden you don't tell your friends that you've gotten back together with them, that kind of stuff. Not that we know anything about that, but.
No, I'm sure not. Never.
Right? So here's let's be practical about what can listeners take away. So one, like watch the guardrail to guardrail. So if you feel this way and then that way, you're probably just going to keep doing that.
Like guardrail to guardrail in this situation being like, oh my God, this relationship is what I need. I have to have it. It feels so good. This relationship is horrible. I got to get out.
Right. Yeah. Right. So when you're in it, the suggestion is to find your doubt. Like, don't just be dissociating the bad. Like, I see that this person, it can be controlling and be insecure and can be petty and can have trouble taking feedback, and I love them and I want to stay in here.
So so finding the balance.
Well, so when you're in it, to be able to feel this side, and then when you're out of it, if you're not feeling loss, right? And if you're not feeling you're like, oh my God, what's this? Like, if it's not vulnerable and you're just like, screw you, I'm out of here. That's probably not going to, that's again where you might. So if you can find what you want to do is if you're going to leave, it's going to be the real permanent leaving. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Like it's just, you're going to know, and you don't have to declare it and you don't have to make it big. Like when you get that inner knowing, which includes both your love and the loss, but also and it's not working, that's a really solid place. So both of those are, you know, being like leaning away from it with the loss is solid, and being in it with the difficulties is solid. So we want the road to get more and more narrow where that you can stay on the road and you're not falling off either side.
Right. Got it. Awesome.
And you're not alone in that process. I think what you were saying too, to feel loneliness. And I think when you mentioned, you know, you don't want to tell your friends you got back together. I think it's so important because we go tell our friends, you know, if you're in a relationship like this and it goes to the other guardrail and you're going, I am done. I can see this.
And they're all like, don't talk to that guy or that girl, or, you know.
Yeah, he or she really, and you're like, yes, you know, and you're in that guardrail. And if you're not holding, like Sue's saying, that part that's saying, I'm going to feel lost, it's so important to go, I know I'm not going to feel this way in 4 days. Can you be there for me? I know I'm not. Right.
Yeah.
If I've done this over and over again, I'm not going to be there. So let people know that, so that when you've gone, I'm done. And then that part where now that separateness starts to hurt and the loneliness comes in and the loss of self, because it's not only the loss of the person who makes you feel bigger than life when it's going,
losing a part of
when it's
your fantasy self.
Yeah. When you're over here, you're with somebody bigger than life. You have their fantasy self and yours. And so when you're over here and going, I'm done with that, and you start to feel this loss, it's painful. And I really want to come at it from a very compassionate place. It is going to feel painful. It is going to feel lonely. And it's a deep loss. It's not just a loss of the person that's not good for you. So knowing that compassionately is so important. And if you're over here done, you've got to know that you're not holding the positives. That is always lures you back in. And that let your friends know, so that when you start to want to go back, right, then you can say, I know this person isn't good for me. I know in the end, I don't feel this way, but I'm so tempted because it makes me feel. And then you're getting in touch with all that inside of what it makes you feel and the needs you have. And friends, most likely, and if not friends, other individuals that really understand this, like what you're doing now, getting information out, hopefully people go, that's why it's so hard. It's not because I'm weak. It's not because I'm being ridiculous. It's because it's super challenging and painful.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that part about the friends too. And and leaning on your friends in those times when you know that it's going to be easy to potentially go back if that's the scenario. And I remember I have a past relationship from 20 years ago that I totally remember that. Like, it was like telling my friends, okay, we're done. I'm done with this stuff and whatever. And then like, oh, hi, how you doing? Yeah, we're back together again. And yeah, that's a tough situation. So just please know, everyone, you're not alone. And we've all had, challenges, maybe not to, necessarily the extent of narcissistic abuse, but you're not alone in this. So I appreciate you guys saying that. So
well, if you're a friend, that's the other way of doing it.
That's a good point.
Like, I love you saying, teach your friends actually how to respond.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're the friend and you're seeing this in someone else, like, that's also a good one, is like, right, okay, I know you feel really strongly about this right now. What do you want me to do well, I want you to stay connected to me if you change your mind. Like, you don't have to go underground.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, let's just keep talking about the whole thing. And then also, if when I see you next week or whatever, and you're back together or you're feeling differently, how do you want me to respond? Do you want me to remind you of this? Or would you rather me sort of support you through the ski trip, as we get down the road? But anyway, I think that will kind of help somebody hold on to themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd love it if you would both share also about your free gift you have for everyone, as well as a course that you have. And everyone watching right now or listening, there's a couple buttons below this video that lead over to Sue and Ann's site. So what do you have for us?
Well, we have a free gift. It's called an attachment bundle. And what we've been speaking about is attachment. That's one of what we specialize in our podcast. And what we put together for you is a bundle that gives you both visuals of the spectrum we speak about, as well as links to some of the most pertinent podcasts and other information. Worksheets, et cetera, that can be really usable. We find it really important to have visuals because so much of this information is so complex.
And when you can locate yourself on a paper, you know what I mean? It's like is organizing.
Right. You can use it in relationship. We also have a course. It's called It's Not Me, It's My Amygdala. Mm-hmm. And for those of us that might not, for those of you that might not follow the podcast, it's about a lot of what we're talking about now is like really learning how our body responds to things. And instead of going through shame, realizing that our body is creating a lot of our reactions. So it's an advanced course about attachment, modern attachment theory. You want to say more about it?
No, it's more than you would ever want to know. It's fantastic. It's 4 hours of curated content. We follow a case, a fake case through it. I think people have loved it. We've gotten great feedback on it. So we really encourage you to sign up for it if you're interested. And if you're not sure, do the bundle first. Then you can see if this is your jam. And then you might want to sign up for the course. But for this, we love these guys so much that we do, if you've stayed with us through this conversation, then we want to offer you a discount, and you just will be using the Avaya code, or you would just click the button below and that'll automatically put you in there with the discount. So there's also, by the way, another free resource below. You're going to see a podcast episode we did there's actually 2 of them, One is talking about from the narcissist perspective and learning more about narcissism, period. And then the other is from the perspective of being in a relationship with a narcissist.
And dealing with the more malignant qualities of gaslighting, et cetera. Also, for those of you that might be therapists, It's Not Me, It's My Amygdala, also you can get 3 hours of CEs.
Excellent.
Therapist nurses.
Cool. Thank you so much. And so again, everybody, there's multiple buttons below. They lead over to the bundle, they lead over to your podcast episodes, as well as to the course. And I can speak from just personal experience. I've talked with you ladies so many times over the past couple of years, and I love your work. And if you all are interested in anything related to, this neuroscience and attachment as it relates to what you're going through in a narcissistic relationship, I highly, highly recommend you check out the buttons below and Ann and Sue's work, because they are amazing. So thank you for what were you gonna say?
We say, if you want a little science with your self-help stuff,
That's right. Well, thank you both for doing this. Again, I always love talking to you, and I really thank you for all the work that you do in the world. Or any last insights, anything else you want to throw out there before we wrap up?
I really just want to speak to whoever's tuning into this, you're tuning into this for a reason. Mm-hmm. And we really hope that whether it be through this video or any of the other videos that you're watching, that the end result is that you feel more confident, more aware of yourself, more confident, more clear of your own boundaries.
More compassionate and knowing that you're not alone.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And one little more tidbit, if I can.
Yeah.
Right? That's okay, content-wise. Yes. There's this cool, I don't know, but this notion of guessing versus saying no. And I'm just going to say it really fast, but basically, if we can get to a point where that instead of making excuses and being unclear in our boundaries, this is a boundary tool. This is a pro tip about boundaries. That anytime that's where we begin to merge a little bit. It's like, well, no, I can't. I'm really busy that day. It thinks that we're not defining ourselves. So what we want to promote is, one, when you hear a no, if you're the receiver of a no, you don't ask why, you don't punish them, you affirm like it's a no and good for you for being able to say no. That's what we want.
Boundaries are good.
Right. And so we have to first be able to receive boundaries before we set them. And then in setting boundaries, that's what you can expect from the person. It's like, you don't have to explain yourself. You don't have to take care of their feelings about it. You really do get to have yourself and say no and have that be respected. So
beautiful.
And that's that. So instead of guessing what the other person wants or what they mean, it's like, no, ask for what you need, and take the no and say no.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. I love it. Ann, anything last for you?
Just that last part is that the getting on this Avaya and seeing that you're not alone and having light bulbs. We are very big on having light bulbs go off and insights going off saying, what I'm doing makes so much sense. And that's such a de-shaming thing. It's like to go, oh, what I'm doing and why this is so hard and why it feels so painful makes so much sense. And now I really can see.
It's not just me.
Yeah, it's not just me. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
And I think also I really want to say this shout out that this can be a really powerful but difficult time right now, as this is likely being played right in the middle of the COVID crisis. Mm-hmm. So for those of us that are home alone and in situations that may be difficult, that you are finding connection and some power in reaching out on this wonderful online Avaya community, by the way. We really appreciate you and that you're a great resource during a time that probably a lot of people really need some love, care, and support right now.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, everyone, we're all in that journey together as well. Very interesting times that we're all faced with right now. So yes, I hope that you take advantage of being able to, maybe have a little extra time to work on yourself, your relationships, and absorb content like this. So awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate you guys. And thank you everyone for tuning in, for showing up for yourself, for knowing you're not alone. And we'll see you all again real soon. Take care.
Awesome.